Hello everybody, welcome back to another video for the day. Now we're going right back into r/talesofneckbeard because you know everybody likes that good old-fashioned story time. You know the deal, like the video, comment down below during the video to start a good old discussion with the other people watching, and consider subscribing. Let's go! Our first story comes to us from username SmallAnxiousThespian. My first neckbeardy experience. There's a really bad TLDR at the end. Only recently did I realize that I had a neckbeardy nice guy experience sometime last year, so I decided it's time to expose the story of this nice guy neckbeard. For the sake of the story, we shall call my dear friend James and the neckbeard Hubert, due to the fact that the hue of his stench would often make me green with nausea. So last year I was hanging out with my friend James before we headed to his place for a casual sleepover since we hadn't seen each other in a while. However, before we got on a bus headed to the town he lives in, I ended up getting a text from my boyfriend, this being before I realized I was a thespian, of the time saying his ex was wanting him back out of the blue. Of course, I was quite upset with that, and we went through this whole conversation where he was telling me multiple times, if you tell me to stay, I will, and with me responding with, I can't force you to stay with me if it makes you unhappy, no matter how much I love you, over and over again, bleh. The relationship complication is kind of important later. So I was a sobbing, recently turned 18-year-old girl getting onto this bus with my friend, and strangers looking extremely uncomfortable because of how emotional I was. Fast forward to getting to their house, we ended up taking midnight walks to try to distract myself, and before I knew it, it was the next day, in which the day of a Highland Games event in Inverness, which we were planning to go to. Of course, my dear friend decided to introduce me to a quote-unquote good friend of theirs, Q Hubert, my very first nice guy neckbeard. James had already explained my situation to Hubert without me knowing, just to let him know why I would seem off that day. So to give a visual of Hubert, he had the classic beard that merged with his neck and a really greasy slick-backed hair. His stench was recognizable, like he didn't know what bathing or even deodorant was. Something that made it worse, I felt comfortable with him at first because he was cosplaying as my favorite doctor, David Tennant, as he was promoting NESCON, which is a small Comic-Con that takes place in Inverness. I had no idea that he actually dressed like that every single day. Normally, I'd be okay with that, except he carried a sonic screwdriver everywhere and referred to everyone as a silly human or his companions. He goes to conventions and does a lot of cosplay, cringy cosplay by the way, and he did have a slightly creepy obsession with Asian women. It didn't help that I am half Asian myself. As the day went on, I was not feeling good at all with my boyfriend and his second guessing. I was texting back and forth with him all day with the same things over and over again until James decided to confiscate my phone so I wouldn't have to deal with him. Hubert finally had a break from his promotion stall, and we all spent some time at a raffle stall trying to win me some alcohol because as a new drinker, I wanted to drown my sorrows of the day. After that, we sat on a patch of grass, and here's something that set off alarm bells. Hubert had put his head on my lap and told me to play with his hair. Being oblivious, I did as he asked, and he started letting out these weird noises like moans. I got so uncomfortable that I wriggled out my legs to get him to move away, and he did. The three of us chilled for the rest of the day, and then I took a journey back to my town. At that point, my best friend asked me to go to her place to talk things through about the situation with my boyfriend. Problem is, my boyfriend is her brother, so who did I see as soon as I walked into the living room? My boyfriend. So I stormed past right into her room and broke down crying. My best friend and I sat there drinking the alcohol I won until I got very tipsy. At that point, I got the courage to speak to my boyfriend face to face, where we talked it through and he said, I love you, I choose you. Looking back on it now, I should have told him that I wasn't just a choice. I shouldn't have believed him, but I did, and the very next day while I was at work, he texted me to say he was breaking up with me and leaving me for his ex after all we went through. I texted Hubert while at work on an upset, desperate whim to talk to someone face to face as I worked in the same town he lived in. We spoke during my break, sitting at the outdoor bench area. I think this might have actually been a big mistake on my behalf because before I knew it, James had made a group chat of us three and we all planned a sleepover at Hubert's place. With James there, I felt like I would be fine. Come sleepover day, it wasn't until I reached Hubert's house that he told me that James wouldn't be coming until the next day. I was iffy about it, however, I did try to give it the benefit of the doubt. He divulged in a secret of his, saying that he was DDLG, MDLB, / whatever the other abbreviations are. I told him, whatever floats your boat, I'm not into that though. He freaking took out a pacifier and started sucking on it and cuddles up to me calling me mommy, whipping out his freaking, a diaper collection. I was 18 and he was 20 21. That was one of the most horrifying, uncomfortable situations I ever went through. Please don't drag me into your kinks and I'm not a part of. Then he tried to give me his old Superman hoodie, which smelled so strongly that I just grimaced, thanked him, and while he turned away, shoved it under his bed. After that, Hubert and I hit up a local pub and downed fish bowls each before heading back to his place, wasted. I started getting emotional, sobbing my eyes out about my ex, and wondering aloud why he decided to date me when he was still hung up about his ex. Hubert grew hella silent and dropped the bombshell on me, like saying shot like, "I love you, I would never have done that to you, I'm a nice guy, and why not give me a chance?" I only knew this guy for 2 weeks. He tried to get me to kiss him, but I told him I wasn't looking for a rebound while I was still hung up about my ex. He got huffy but didn't push it until we went to a local nightclub where he tried to bump and grind with me. At that point, I grew extremely distant and became a bit rude to ward him off, making it seem like it was all about my ex and not the fact that he was making me uncomfortable. I know I should have gotten out of there, but I was too naive and inexperienced to realize that he was taking advantage of a distraught girl. As soon as we made it back to his place, I asked where I would be sleeping. Another room? No. A set-up bed in the same room? No. I was to sleep in the same bed as him. Immediately, I declined and told him I would sleep on the floor. He insisted, so I lied on the bed with him until he started cuddling up to me. I forcefully yanked myself away and put myself on the floor without a blanket, feeling safer down there. Morning came and James still had not arrived. Hubert then told me that James had just told him that he was busy and couldn't make any of it. That was the last straw for me, so I thanked him for letting me stay the night and booked it to the train station. After that, he spammed me with messages which I refused to respond to until he finally gave up after a few months. Earlier this year, James and I talked to each other about Hubert. Apparently, he called me a lying wholesome, saying I led him on and kept on leaving him on scene. I explained the situation to James as to why I was ignoring Hubert and asked him why he canceled last minute. James was horrified and told me he canceled a week in advance and told Hubert to tell me. That honestly pissed me off beyond belief, but thank frick I don't have to deal with that crap ever again. TLDR, my boyfriend has second thoughts about me, and while that happens, my friend introduces me to another friend, the neckbearding nice guy. My boyfriend breaks up with me and Neckbeard swoops in. The Neckbeard lies to me, tries to guilt trip me, drags me into uncomfortable situations, and half a year later, my friend clears up misunderstandings on our end, revealing Neckbeard's true colors. Edit, James didn't have my number, but I'm not sure as to why he didn't just DM me on Messenger. Maybe he was taking a social media break or something. He was AWOL for a while due to some family problems, which is why he canceled. I hope you're doing better. I know that the relationship probably shook you up a good amount, but I'm glad that you're doing better and you don't have to deal with any neckbeard related stuff. Our next story comes to us from username Scruffly89, The Ballad of Pestbeard. I was just reminded in another subreddit of an encounter I had whilst at uni a few years ago and thought you guys might enjoy the tale. I shall dub the beard in question Pestbeard, as he was apparently what my lending agent saw fit to send out as pest control. Lord knows where they dragged this sketchy dude up from, although in all fairness he must have been cheap at least. A quick little description of the guy before we start. Picture a gnomish creature in a grubby faded black sweater, no uniform or polo shirt with the company name, just grubby house clothes. Also, I have nothing against gingers, but it didn't lend itself well to the sort of filthy neglect beard he'd cultivated. Late 30ish, roughly 10 years older than me at the time, and a self-described retro gamer. Again, nothing wrong with that, but I'm sure you can picture exactly the type. He was the kind of socially inept that isn't cute and sets off those neck hairs in a bad way. Anyway, back to the scene of the crime. It was a group house of about 7 students, including myself, and though we were pretty clean, the previous group had been a bit of a hygiene deficiency. They'd had a habit of inviting their neighbor's cat over, and there was also a bit of a mouse issue due to the previous state of the property that it had been in. This had resulted in a nasty flea infestation, despite an apparent deep clean before we arrived. So this guy rocks up in his personal car, a rusting brown Ford Fiesta. He then proceeds to take out one of those pump-action garden sprayers that you can get from a B&Q for a $5, and starts to go about his business inspecting the issue. I'm already a little skeptical of this guy and his merits. The letting agent had clearly just brought in the cheapest option they could get away with, but all I wanted was the issue solved, so I tried to be as polite as possible. Now, I will state here, I'm a little awkward myself and have a terrible habit of talking a lot of rubbish when I'm nervous, along with smiling a bit too much. Sometimes people like Pestbeard tend to take this as flirting, which he evidently did. He starts going on and on about some fairly concerning stuff about his ex-wife, how she ended up with his 2 kids kids, how she turned them against him or something, but how he didn't mind not having the responsibility. Stuff you just don't share with strangers unless you want to look mad. Then he starts going on about some girl he liked at some trendy nearby cafe. He kept going on about how she was so cool and funny and attractive and down to earth, and how she was totally into him, but how he was too nervous to ask her out and didn't want to be let down, all the old chestnuts. Anyway, me being at this point terribly nervous and baffled, just said something along the lines of, well, just give it a go, to which he just responded that no girl like that would want a guy like him, or something. Sure, well, cool, I guess. This went on for about half an hour until he suitably confirmed the extent of the infestation, at which point he explained that I'd need to leave the house for a few hours to let him spray and allow it to dry. He suggested driving me down to the nice little cafe he'd mentioned, and not knowing what else I should do under the circumstances, as well as at this point being pretty baffled and confused, I agreed. Looking back, I should not have gotten into this weirdo's car. However, whilst he was odd, he was also about an inch shorter than me, about 10 years older, and all of his extra weight was flat. I guess I didn't feel that intimidated by him. Also, to his credit, he actually didn't try anything. Not that I wasn't lucky he didn't. Anyway, I get in his car, and as things were socially out there enough, he asks if I wouldn't mind him taking a detour into a town to stop by this retro gaming store to pick up an order. So here I am, shopping with this strange guy who'd come to service my house, just staring at old copies of Tomb Raider, waiting for him to pick up his game and finish yattering with the shopkeeper. Eventually, he drops me off at the cafe, and I return home after he's all finished up, and it's apparently safe. I say apparently because even though he dropped me a text saying it's okay to return, half of the pest spray was clearly still wet. At this point, I was just glad the whole ordeal was over, and that I was none of the worse for wear. I forget about it all for about a week, until this guy has to return for some reason. I can't remember if it was to check up or the fleas have returned or something, but anyway, this time thankfully my boyfriend was staying over with me. Pestbeard clocks this and immediately is clearly nonplussed. He starts apparently trying to show off his pest knowledge in a bizarre attempt to what I think was him trying to impress me. At one point, he noted we had those little daddy longleg spiders, the ones with the tiny green bodies and the thread-like legs, and tries passing it off as an old urban myth that they're the most venomous animal on Earth, but just don't have fangs to bite with. I very gently try to explain that I'm painfully aware he's talking complete and utter shot, but he just doubles down and insists that no, he's the pest man and he knows what he's on about, okay? I don't care. At this point, I kind of just let him carry on. Eventually, he pops his head around the bedroom door and lets me and the mister know he's done. I go to show him to the door and thank him, but before he goes, his bitter little soul fires the wettest shart of a parting shot at my boyfriend for existing and getting in the way of me having no interest in this weirdo in the slightest. Now, my boyfriend is about 6'1" and has a bit of a wonky nose and a couple of facial scars from high contact school sports as a kid. Also, an unfortunate incident with a glass of cola. At a first glance, some people seem to take away the impression that he's a bit of a bad boy due to this. The thing is that he's actually the definition of a giant well-meaning puppy dog, which is what makes that what Pestbeard said so upsettingly sad and hilarious. As soon as he has me out of earshot, he leans in close with a hushed, conspiratorial tone and says, "I've seen him about. I know him. He's done things. Be careful." Having known my darling as just a big soft goofball for by this point quite a few years, this doesn't exactly chime from the mouth of a dodgy stranger. Upon asking from exactly where Pestbeard knows him, he attempts to make a horrible guess based on my boyfriend's accent, and unsurprisingly gives me a location that is nowhere where my boyfriend lives. I politely offer Pestbeard a dignified exit from this steaming pile of shot to save us both the embarrassment by saying he must have mistaken him for somebody else, but no, again he doubles down, insisting that he'd recognize him anywhere. He firmly states that he's got a very recognizable face and voice, and that I should watch out for him. Alright, well, I guess some people were determined to make a train wreck of their life, and who the heck am I to stop them? He departs with a final dramatic "goodbye, I'll probably never hear from you again now," before driving off in a rusty little Ford Fiesta, thankfully never indeed to be seen again. Bonus happy fact, I actually really did like the cafe, and me and my sister ended up going there regularly as they had an excellent range of artisan teas. TLDR, shady pest control man in his late 30s tries to woo me with tales of his ex, borderline kidnaps me to pick up a game, drops me off at his favorite cafe in a vain attempt to charm me or something. Later in episode 2, he tries to impress me with his knowledge of shoddy misinformation about household spiders, and makes the most petty attempt in history to put down the man I love, merely resulting in me being mildly confused confused and offended. Okay, I don't know exactly what was going through this guy's mind when he was thinking, oh, maybe I'll go over, see this woman, and it'll work out just like those videos with the pizza man and the plumber, right? It's a weird little story, and I'm glad that you don't have to deal with him ever again, hopefully. But with that is going to have to be it with the video. If you would like what you had seen, be sure to slam that like button, leave a comment down below what you liked about the video, and start up a discussion with the other people watching, and consider subscribing. I'll be sure to see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and bye-bye.